What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over Quest System Part 4. So the Quest System is probably my favorite system that we worked on so far, and I feel pretty excited to go into Part 4 here. So Part 4 is going to be about giving rewards from completing quests. We did set up a reward structure throughout the other quest episodes, but we never actually did anything with it. Now that we're able to complete quests, the next thing we want to do is actually reward the player for completing that quest. And then technically we want to go to the next quest in the series. However, we want to set up our data tables for quests first. So we'll do that in the next questing episode. And then we'll go over the actual quest flow from one to the other and some unlocking when others finish, that sort of thing. At some point, I'd also like to go over like mandatory and optional quests, or primary optional, where you can choose to complete a quest or not. If you fail it, it's not a game over, it continues. You could also do this with objectives. Just a heads up for the things to come. So anyway, today's episode, you can see if I open my inventory, I have nothing. I'm going to give the player an axe weapon for completing a quest. And I'm also going to give them experience. So if you take a look at that bottom left bar, it's completely empty right now, but it'll fill yellow when we get experience. So once I pick up one more pickup, then we are going to complete this quest. You can see the quest went away. I got experience, and now if I check my inventory, I never picked any weapons up. I now have an axe in my inventory. So I got a weapon, and I got experience from completing the quest. Minus any sort of like flashiness from completing the quest, that's pretty much the entire quest flow. We have objectives that we complete. Once they're all done, the quest gets completed, and then we receive our rewards. So, won't waste any more time. Let's get into it today. Now, just so you're aware, I believe this is episode 22 of the Action RPG tutorial series. It's actually around episode 30 of the overall third-person tutorial series. It got rebranded in the middle just because I knew the direction I wanted to go with it. So I'll leave this iCard right here in the top right corner to the entire playlist for the third person series so you can catch up to everything we've done so far. If you don't care about all that, but you do want to watch the questing system, then I'll leave the link to the first episode of that right here. You can also find all the episodes linked in the description. All right. So the first thing we have to do is actually fix a minor issue that we had left in the previous episode. So for those of you that played the game and worked on the previous episodes, you may have noticed that you could actually complete the objectives out of order, and sometimes it would screw up. Like I could complete the same objective multiple times. Say for example, if I were to beat our golem to death, and remember, if I hit a dead golem, it gives us another one. And that was on purpose. That was just for testing with the quests and the numbers. So don't worry about that. That's not a bug. But I would be able to hit him again and sometimes actually take away from the next objective, which is wrong. The other issue that came up with the same line was that if I sometimes completed an objective before expected, so for example, if I completed the second objective in the list as opposed to the first, it would actually end the entire quest. This was due to one line that I forgot to write, and it made all the difference. In your setup objective function that we have, at the very end of it, add this line, objectives objective num.isComplete equals false. When we're setting up the objectives, we want to make sure that we know this objective is not completed, because if you don't specifically define this value, it can get assigned garbage data or some random value, and the way Booleans work is false is just basically a 0 and true is anything greater than 0. So if the garbage data happens to get assigned to this variable and it's something other than 0, it could actually say that isComplete is true unless your objective would sometimes get completed when it wasn't supposed to. So we want to specifically say, no, this objective is not completed when we're setting it up. This will fix both those issues I mentioned earlier. I've also added a few comments throughout the code, you may notice. A little bit more than last time. It's not imperative that you actually do this. I just want to let you know that I did do that, so it should be a little bit easier to read as we're going through. All right, but the first thing we want to do today related to the rewards is take a look at our reward structure, because we made this very early on. I think we made it in the first episode of the third-person tutorial series for the quest items. So we have this eQuest reward enum value that determines the type of reward that it is. I'm actually not going to be using this much today. This is going to be used later for if we want to show the rewards. We can kind of group them together and things like that. But in all actuality, I don't think that a lot of quests will not have experience in my case. So you're going to see me using both experience and item in today's episode. However, they could definitely be useful. If you want to break it up for yours, then there's not an issue with that at all. It's there if you'd like to use it more than I do. But the main thing we want to look at is the F reward structure. So here, this holds all the data for the rewards that we'll need to know. It does hold the reward type, as I just mentioned, if we want to use that. But more importantly, it holds an instance of the class for the item that is going to be stored here. So for example, it doesn't hold a reference to an item, but say it's an axe, then we know that we should spawn an axe and give it to the player once the quest has been completed and the rewards are dealt to, the corresponding player. So in this case, I have, again, basically a subclass of this item, so what class it is to spawn, and then the amount of experience that we get. And that was already set up in the previous episodes, but that's just a reminder for what's going on there. Now, if we scroll down, we're going to add some more functions in here. So, I've added 2 new functions. I've added give rewards and set character assigned to quest. It's not necessary that you actually do this one, set character assigned to quest, but this is going to be better for multiplayer support down the line. So, assuming that you have multiple characters on one quest, I'm going to use something like Borderlands as an example, even though it doesn't quite fit this series. It's the same idea. So you can have multiple players performing and working together on one quest in that game. For the main character, they get their quest completed and they can continue their story. For other players in the game, they can actually complete quests if they have that quest unlocked, and it will be completed on that character going forward. However, if they do not have that quest unlocked at the point of completing it as a client on someone else's game, then they will have to complete the quest again when they get to it. Now, this is thinking ahead a little bit, but assuming we want to support multiplayer in this series at all, we are going to want to keep track of what character is doing what in the game mode, and, what character is attacking what enemy, these sort of things. So this is just kind of an additional thing I'm adding here. It's not necessary for today by any means, but if you add this now, it'll make it easier to turn this into a multiplayer game down the road. So I made both of them blueprint callable. They probably don't have to be for now, but again, I like to keep pretty much everything blueprint callable until I know for sure that it's not. I always go back and clean it up later. Okay. I've also added another variable, and this is specifically just the pointer to the character. So basically this function, set character assigned to quest, is going to set this variable with whatever we pass into it. But this is so I can keep a reference to it. We may want to save data out if the player is halfway through a quest and they save and quit their game. And so another useful thing is to have this variable here so we know what characters have what quests. Okay. And when you try and do these at first, you probably won't be able to unless you've included a third-person tutorial character or whatever your base character is. So make sure you go up to the top of your file. You might have errors when you go to build, and if you do, just make sure you add this line right here. This is because, of course, if we don't have access to that file from this file, then we won't be able to use things that are created in that file. All right, and that's all for basequest.h. Now let's go to the CPP. We're going to be working mainly in basequest today, pretty much nowhere else. We are going to do a little bit in the game mode. All right, so in the CPP, we're going to take a look at our functions again. They're pretty much, a lot of them are going to be the same, but I'm going to go over and glance over a few of them, even the ones we haven't touched, just to kind of remind you of what's going on, especially because it is going to be useful in the next episodes going forward with rewards. So in the constructor, I've actually changed my values a bit. I kept the reward type to be default. For me, default is going to be the case of if there's more than one. It could be if there's more than one or if there's none, actually. So default is just going to be, it's not a specified reward type. It's not only experience, it's not only item. So in this case, I'm going to be giving it both, so I just leave it alone. But I do set the experience to be 0. I think this is important because in the past, I had the experience to be set to 100 by default, which was fine. But now that we're actually using this reward system, you don't want to get confused on why you're getting 100 even if the quest itself isn't supposed to be an experience quest, or the quest isn't supposed to reward you with experience. So probably reset that to 0. Make sure your item is null pointer. There's no item by default. And then we're going to go into set quest details. So we had the string and the description before, and we were just setting the quest's information based off of the value we pulled in the blueprint. We're not using any sort of data table or database now, so we were manually typing in the name and description. But one thing we do need to add to this is the reward experience and the reward item that we received. The same way that we set up the objectives with like the enemy that we have to slay or the item we have to pick up, we have to know these things when the quest is being set so that we can display to the player what the reward is, or so that we know what to give the player when they complete the reward. So add these two variables to your function here, set quest details, float reward XP, T subclass of default item, reward item. Make sure when you do that, you add it to the base quest.h file as well in set quest details. Then, if you go back into the CPP file, what I've done is pretty simple. I've checked reward.experience and set it equal to the reward experience coming into the function. So whatever we give these values, whether it's coming from the database or if we hard code it, this value that we assign to this quest is going to be set to the reward structure that we have. Now, this was already made in a prior episode as well, but specifically what I'm setting here is this freward structure instance. Okay, so I made it, I set the default values in the constructor, and now I'm overriding them with the values that we are passing in for this specific quest. So reward.experience is equal to the reward XP, and if reward item, reward.item equals reward item. Technically, you don't have to do this because T subclass of will do some error handling for you, but I always like to do an if check when possible to kind of do a sanity check or basically make sure that we're not going to crash. So I do like to check and make sure that that there is an item and that it's valid. And then once it has this class type, we set the reward.item equal to that reward item that's being passed in. And so essentially what we've done here is made it so that the quest itself has information regarding the enum, the experience points, and the item. And of course you can add as many other things as you want to this list so that you know what is being a reward for the quest once it gets completed. All right, setup objective is already done. Other than this, make sure that you add this. Talked about this earlier in the episode, but I won't cover that one again. We went into a lot of depth in that one. This is updating the objective. We went into a lot of depth in that one too, so I'll skip it. Same with the description here. Okay, finish objective, finish quests, and then I have these at the bottom. So for finished quests, what we were doing in the past was logging out the quest name that we completed, so we know what quest was finished, and just so that we could see that it was working, and then we were hiding the quest information. So now what we're doing is we are still printing it out and we're still hiding it, but we want to give the rewards to the player. The order here you can choose if you want to give the rewards before the quest is hidden or if you want to do it after. I've just put it before. So I called the give rewards function that we created in the header file, and now we got to fill out both of these functions in the CPP. So let's start with give rewards. Give rewards, what we want to do is make sure that there is a character period that we have. If this value is null pointer, this is a character assigned to quests. then we don't have any character to give rewards to. So either, say, a character completed, something happened during a disconnect, and we don't have a character, it would cause a crash if it was null pointer. If we also never set up a character, for whatever reason, we failed to assign it, or it got mixed up along the way, it would fail. So we want to make sure that the character assigned to quest is valid, just by doing this if check right here. Then, if it is valid, we want to go ahead and spawn an item of the type that we have here. Now, in this case, we are giving it an item. So if reward.item.get is not equal to anything or not equal to a class, we'll probably want to handle that, and we'll actually cover that right now. So let's make sure before we spawn an item that it is valid. Okay, so after that change, you can see we only want to spawn this item if reward.item.get is valid. This is because technically the spawn actor should just fail, and it shouldn't crash if you give it a U class that is null pointer. However, again, just to be extra safe, we don't even need to run this logic and slow down our game if we don't have a valid item to be spawned and assigned and given to the player. So if reward.item.get, then we want to go into this and we want to spawn a class or an instance of the class that the reward.item has. So remember, reward.item, reward is an freward structure instance, and it has a T subclass of default item. So the way this works is this T subclass of is basically just storing the class type. It's not storing an item, it's storing a class type. So we need to spawn an item of that class type and give it to the player. Now, for down the road, you might want to spawn it with specific stats or things like that that could be different. Like, for example, say you could have the same weapon, but it has different stats. A lot of games do that. Then that we can determine after. It will still work with this method, just so you're aware. But for right now, we're just going to spawn any instance of the weapon, and we're going to give it to the player. So this is how you spawn an actor in C++. So a lot of times we spawn our actors in Blueprint. In fact, I think it's pretty much the only way we've done it in this series so far. But you can actually spawn an actor in code without too much issue. We just have to know what we're doing with it. So what I've done is I've actually spawned an actor at just random coordinates, the origin here, and then given it to the player's inventory. Really what we should probably do is spawn it, set its visibility, maybe hide it, or just save out a reference to it and add it to the inventory. However, there's still a few things that we're working on with the inventory, so I'm keeping it open at the moment. We'll figure out exactly how we want it to work as the series progresses. I just don't want to lock us into a certain way when we're not even finished with the inventory system yet. So let's ignore that part of it, and let's just focus on what we're doing here as far as the quest reward goes. We need to give this item to our player. We need to add it to their inventory, but we need an item to do that. So we take our reward.item.get, and this has the class type. So if we go over this function, this is how it works. Get world spawn actor is a function in Unreal that exists to spawn an actor into the world. You don't have to write this. It comes default with Unreal. In brackets, you put the type that you want to spawn. We want to spawn a default item. All of our items in the game, this includes weapons, pickups, armor, these are all children of a default item. So I know that the reward type that the character is going to get, if this reward.item is valid, is going to be of type a default item. So it's safe to put this in here. If you wanted, you could put something like a actor if yours is a little bit more open than mine is. And then you give it the class type. Again, in this case, we have it from reward.item.get. Then you give it a location and a rotation. So I've just made an F vector and a rotation vector here with all zeros, just to kind of give it parameters that it can use. Then I've set it equal to this new item that I'm making. It's a pointer, a default item pointer, reward item. And so this item right here is what's going to get added to our inventory. To do that, we can use our character signed to quest and call the add to inventory function. However, in the past, when we had this function, these functions were in the protected namespace in the third-person tutorial character.h. And the way this works, since these are not actors, but these are actually U objects, these quests. See how it's got the U instead of A for actor? We need to make sure, these are in no way related to which we could call that function. So what we have to do is make sure that we can have access to these functions. The way you can do that, you can do it a few different ways. The simplest way is just to put the functions in public. So these are the same functions that already existed. I did not make them. Add to inventory and gain experience. All I've done is move them from where it said protected. This is automatically a field in your character class if you're using the template like I am. And just put it into public. You may have already put it there, depending on where you added your functions. But these two in particular, gain experience and add to inventory, will need to be public for us to be able to call them from the base quest. So once you've moved them, you can now call this add to inventory. And it takes in a default item pointer. Well, we just made one. It was the return value of the actor that got spawned. So then pass that in as the item to be added to the inventory. Then we also want to update the character's experience. You could do a check to see if the experience is greater than 0, but really it doesn't matter. If you add 0 to a number, it remains the number that it already was. So one addition is not going to slow down our game tremendously or really anything noticeable. So you can just add it no matter what. All I do for that, character assigned to quest, gain experience, reward.experience. And now for this function, set character assigned to quest, it's pretty simple what it's doing. It's assigning our actual variable to the parameter that comes into it. We'll have to call this in the game mode to set this up. But this will get a little bit easier as things go on. Right now, the reason that we have this and the reason this is good for multiplayer is because in Unreal, we don't even actually spawn our character through the game mode. Our character is actually just in the scene, and we auto-possess him by, if I can find it, I might have to search for it. By right here, auto-possess player. That's the only reason we take control of this character. If I were to disable that, we would just be floating in the air. Which is fine. It's not terrible for right now, but it's definitely going to need to be changed. And so at this point, we don't actually spawn the character from the game mode like we should. So in the game mode, we will need to set the character assigned to quest. Now, it's a good time to go to Unreal and go to our base game mode BP. This is where we had done pretty much all our quest stuff in the past. And again, I mentioned, we should do this with data tables, and we will. We'll cover that next episode. But for now, I'm leaving the same logic for everything that we have in here already. Not changing anything that we have in here already. I'm just going to update using the 2 new functions that we have. And I'm going to update the set quest details since we changed the parameters in it. Okay, so in begin play, what I do is I create a HUD widget, and then I create a base quest, set it to be the current quest for the player, and then fill out all the information for it. That way it can populate on the HUD. Then we set more things like the name and description of the quest, as well as all of the objective information. The only things we're editing now are set quest details, this panel right here. So this has the name, the description, and that was it. But we've added the reward experience and the reward item now. So you can make these whatever you want. These are the input parameters that go in right here. So this experience and this item. If you fill out the items in this node when you call it, that's when you will actually get experience and actually get an item when you are to complete the quest. So for example, if I put this at 50 experience, and I did not give us an item, contrary to what you saw earlier, and I play this game. Let's say I pick up the sword and use this because this has a lot faster time to kill. and we kill this enemy. We're going to have to hit him one more time. There we go. And let's say I go and I pick up these 2 items. Now, you can see I got experience, and everything looks good there. Let's go to our menu. You can see I only have my sword. I was not given another item. So there you go. That's how this works. Now, if I do give it another item, and I can do it again if we want, I'll put the item reward as a helmet. We'll just try beating him to death, and we'll see if that's actually a little bit faster. There we go. Okay, I got the same amount of experience, but when I go into my inventory now, I have a basic helmet that I can equip. So that's how the system works. So you can give whatever you like as a reward as long as it's a child of default item or a default item itself. And then you change the experience and get more experience from it. The other thing we need to do is actually set this value. Straighten this because I noticed it was a little bit off. So we need to assign our character. Since we don't actually assign our character using the game mode yet, we need to do it just kind of manually here. Once we spawn the character from the game mode, this will become a lot easier. But for right now, all I'm doing is I'm going to rig this together so that this works. So we want to get all actors of class. We want to select our characters class, which is base character BP. We want to get a copy, index 0. There should only be one anyway at the current time. And then this blue line right here is the quest reference, the base quest. This is what has the set character assigned to quest function to call. Oops. So call the function and then pass in the value and then hook it up. And once you do this, now you'll have that variable set. At that point, you should have everything ready to go. And when you play your game, you should see it functioning as expected. So anyway, guys, that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please subscribe. It does more for me and the channel than anything else you can do. I really appreciate it. I want to give you guys a huge, huge thank you for 4,000 subscribers. Thank you so much for all the love and support on all these series and for in the community as a whole. Thank you so much. I want to give more support to the Patreon supporters and YouTube membership supporters as well. Thank you guys for continuing to go above and beyond to support me in this channel. I'm glad that you believe in these tutorials as much as I do and love them as much as I do. Thank you so much. If you guys did have any issues with this episode or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. Be happy to help you out and get any of your issues sorted. And that's all I got for you guys. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.